Resurrected at the end of World War II, rising Cold War tensions gave new life to the concept of an intercontinental bomber. What emerged from the drafting tables of the Consolidated Aircraft Company was a plane from the pages of a Jules Verne novel. Designated the B-36, the Titanic bomber may not have been designed to start a war, but it could unleash the destructive power to finish one. With a wingspan nearly as long as a football field, its body seemed to stretch on forever. Its enormous tail rose nearly 5 stories, and with the capacity to hold 4 rail cars of fuel, the bomber could remain airborne for more than 50 hours. With a crew of 16, the aircraft's forward and rear crew compartments were separated by a bomb bay more than 80 feet in length. In full attack configuration, the B-36 could carry 2 atomic bombs with the destructive energy of 2,000 boxcars of TNT. Getting the 200-ton bomber into the air required 6 piston-powered engines with propellers measuring 19 feet in diameter. Christened the Peacemaker, the intercontinental bomber soon became the new icon of American might. 2 years after it entered service, the only thing it needed to fulfill its mission was an even more lethal atomic bomb. Even before the U.S. dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan in 1945, scientists were hard at work designing what they described as the holy grail of nuclear weapons, the Mark IV. Like its predecessor, the Mark IV would be a fission-type weapon, like the bomb dropped on the city of Nagasaki. As big as a mid-sized car, the Mark IV was designed to be built in large numbers. It would be the world's first assembly line-produced nuclear weapon. Weighing in at more than 10,000 pounds, most of the bomb's weight was made up of an inner and outer sphere of high explosives weighing nearly 3 tons. But the Mark IV's destructive nuclear punch would come from a plutonium core, levitated within a hollow shell of uranium. Near the rear of the weapon, a cylindrical electronics package known as the X unit held the bomb's sophisticated firing system. Once dropped, a series of fuses would initiate the nuclear chain reaction. The X unit would then trigger detonators positioned on the face of each of the high explosive lenses. With twice the destructive power of previous bombs, the Mark IV could lay waste to the heart of any city in the world, radiation leaving it uninhabitable for years. After the U.S. had shaken the world with its detonation of the first atomic weapons, the balance of nuclear power found its equilibrium. In the summer of 1949, with plans Soviet spies had stolen from the Americans, Russia detonated its first nuclear bomb. In response to the Soviet threat, the Air Force creates Strategic Air Command, or SAC. SAC's mission was simple and uncompromising: maintain a sufficient number of B-36s capable of leaving the Soviet Union a smoking, radiating ruin. To prepare for a potential nuclear showdown with the Soviets, SAC crews trained around the clock in full combat posture. 5 years after it began its battle with the Atomic Energy Commission, the Air Force finally received its first live nuclear weapon for training. It was a Mark IV, and it was headed for Alaska to be loaded on bomber B75. As Jim Laird hikes up to the wreck on the team's second day on the mountain, he finds a new trail of clues.
Looks like a hatch cover, John.
It's so hard for me to imagine somebody trying to jump through a hole this small in the mid-dead of night, middle of winter.
Scattered among the rocks, the first evidence of B75's flight crew.
Looks like a bunch of personal gear here. Several boots and a button here.
Oh, look, Jim, it's rank badge. I think there was probably only one person on board that this luggage could have belonged to.
That would be McDonald?
Lieutenant Colonel MacDonald was one of the lucky ones. He got rescued.
And the UTM coordinates?
With the first archaeological permit ever issued by the government, the team will collect and catalog artifacts they hope will answer two unsettling questions.
527.
Was a plutonium core on board 075? And did Ted Schreier, the man responsible for the nuclear weapon, stay on board and fly the bomber to its glacier hiding spot?
There's no end to the personal effects in here, or the operational ones. Dirk, oxygen hose.
Well, I like to get my hands on Captain Schreier's stuff.
Looks like deflector sight.
Hey guys, I got one. Whoa. White parachute in perfect condition. Its silk is just as new.
Near the pristine parachute, Scepter also finds an unused flotation device known as a Mae West.
Without jumping to any conclusions, these two items indicate they hadn't been used, and which might indicate that one of the crew members didn't jump.
In an effort to determine the Peacemaker's final heading, Jim Laird is high above the wreck trying to identify an engine that rests several hundred feet from the crash site.
Wait a minute. Here on this piece of the nacelle it says engine number 1. So that must mean the plane is right side up. And it came in facing east. That was the number 1 engine. And if I take a compass bearing back along this line, I should be able to figure out where it came from. Mm-hmm. So, if we look this way through that dip beside Mount Kologet and take a bearing from here to there, towards the southwest, the heading is 075.
075.
075.
Laird and Scepter believe this new discovery adds another piece of evidence to their theory that a crew member stayed on board 075 in an attempt to save the birdcage and its plutonium payload.
Incredible burn. The birdcage, which was used to carry the core, it should have been in this region. The photos, some of the recent photos seem to show it in this location of wreckage. There's nothing here in the area of the photographs.
To Clearwater's disappointment, the birdcage used for transporting the bomb's radioactive core and the detonators for initiating the nuclear chain reaction are missing.
It's a significant loss in terms of atomic history. This is the first broken arrow. We don't have these objects.
With their time on the mountain running out, it's a huge blow to the expedition.
If there was a core, the danger of this cannot be underestimated. There's enough power in this one core to level any city in North America.
After World War II, Ted Schreier left the Army Air Force for a job in civilian aviation. By 1946, the airline industry was beginning to boom, and the bright young pilot from Wisconsin landed a job with the newly formed American Airlines. Schreier settled into domestic life with his wife Jean and looked forward to a future flying passengers around the country. But less than a year later, to the couple's frustration, Ted was recalled to active duty with Strategic Air Command. Schreier was hand-picked to attend the elite Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, where he was to be trained as a weaponeer, the crewman responsible for a B-36's nuclear payload. Fred Schreier was 6 when his uncle was put in charge of 075's atomic bomb.
We were never told any details about the mission, what it entailed. We found out later he was the 3rd pilot and the weaponeer.
To prevent an accidental nuclear explosion, Schreier would arm the Mark IV with its nuclear core once the bomber was safely airborne. After removing the detonator mounted on the trapdoor, he would then extract an outer and inner sphere of the high explosives. Last to be removed was the pit plug, a 7-inch long cylinder of aluminum and depleted uranium. Schreier would then carefully insert the radioactive core. Once the bomb's missing components were replaced, the Mark IV would be an armed nuclear weapon and ready for war. But the bomber designed to carry the Mark IV to the target had a deadly flaw: its new engines. A fact that Captain Harold Barry and Gunner Dick Thrasher would learn on their first B-36 flight.
On my very first flight, we burned an engine off, and he had to have nerves of steel, and he brought that thing in as smooth a landing. It was the first landing ever made with just 3 engines on one side. Months later,
Thrasher and Barry would be ordered to Alaska to fly a dangerous training exercise aboard another B-36, Bomber 075. The top-secret mission would test the war readiness of the B-36, her crew, and SAC's first Mark IV nuclear bomb. With strict orders not to fly over Canadian airspace, nuclear bomber 075 will shadow the British Columbia coastline as it makes its way from Alaska to the U.S. mainland. Once off the coast of Washington state, 075 will head east to Great Falls, Montana, before turning south to conduct a simulated bombing run on the city of San Francisco. At a cruising speed of less